Thank you. We will now resume business. And the next item of business is a debate on motion 17966 in the name of Kate Forbes on Scottish Languages Bill at Stage 3. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Deputy First Minister to speak to and to move the motion up to 7 minutes, please.
Moran Tang. Sound tro jallig bile nen canon albanach uur a horste urst a hoshichin process parliament shaw. Chai hurin keel gu folishach gre ar namas a violenting nen kimen in lishin jeg aumri chach nas cheeranche a cruachach de Gaelic agus albish. Hashin Jo urtish a coshin a yunsi a yalishin. Hashin 4 vochel na chai shaw exersich a huas a vain ri rielig nen canon. Hashin son kimenin a gal a ver bui clachach nen canon an een dachien a vies gan njarstichach sa coirsnach agus senaatje oprach. Chai in billishaw a jespet ag imidach ire et jalichtje. Na mesk, na hierin jespet coirsnach, co cornea armel, lesachach policy, agus in scrúdach is aardigach a rein a farlamit shaw. Ha in bille a vi een njarstichach a gach ire ska nan jespet in shaw. Se gialian sullier agus ard amasach a va coolov a villa shaw. Le vi a goper as le Gaelic agus alabish, hashin in corny a tukal agus a cud rish na gnievin a chai a chud in saas le dunje roin. Fémer a vi a ganjachach a villa shaw agus kemen in ille mar farst rietenach gen a vi a carrig a chron a gulling na canon an een lientjen na straie. Se shaw a heet a chai alabish a korachach an een ruchgus. Se vies me hierig ha me tuil a cherif skol Gaelic a haas an airk de glasachu agus een skol Gaelic a ha a sheer fast an een innernish. Ha mi vi in saas an een Korean man haich a ver Gaelic don economy an een skieren kugelach. Hier Korean urtish agus leis a villishaw ní sin cínseach gan len intartas sin. Ha sin éisteach. Ha sin gáil rí beachgan van choirsnach. Ha jespedin man villishaw nochga charis na cynnivinacham le luch choirsnach agus le mescachach je bhíon in Gaelic agus alabish. Ha sin buanach ein vo vi a córach rí beil farlamich agus fáilte a chud rí mollion nan bail parliament. Rin viachsa ha bile parliament aking a ha a ruchgach luch in Schamer shaw ulle geleer. Ha sin máchel je horian a chunte slui me jerig. Si het shaw over son dochis, misneach agus dúlen. Mar is aviste le Gaelic agus alabish han tuavas oprach roin agus an bille shaw a tors jein in commis agus na dóin an san chéid urtas a bharach a chosin. Ha cuachgan úras a bille shaw ag a bhel bui áitichen a ha riatanach rí lesachach na Gaelic agus na halabish. A hu viúnsachach chai cémanin elenting gus corim na siar a horst do gúne fölum travíon na Gaelic agus gus gurisan fölum lesachach do Galabish san Schamer scolle. A húf coirsnach, héid cuachgan a chudin saas gus córachach is taich a horst do skieren ag a bhel cielchan cutramach don Gaelic agus gus taich a horst gaifsan a haar furach is a goper sna skieren seo. Amsan ro injelach agus na bun injevin a ha in bille a curir urst, bí sin a míneachach nan príomhachas an aking agus na targetchen an bí sin a gamas. Han bille seo a torstesteach cuachgan gus skieren caning sáritje a córachach. Se mian a ville gur proses córachi rút a ver cuach de choirsnach in Gaelic agus gan bí skieren caning sáritje a cur taich grí cémanin practicach. Mar éisimpler, a bhí a torst seachad servisin trávíon na Gaelic agus solar na siar son fölum Gaelic rus an buring údarasan il inadal déalaigh mar príomhachas. In leib y vile seo, ha mesgachach je cochgan son fulham, trofian na Gaelic, cochgan gus njarstachach mar a héid arish policy in canon, agus fiegin curis glestanis ministerin ro injelachgan agus bun injevin steachach. Siad seo cuichgan ure agus bied ga janu nas comisach tulug urtis coshin. Heg aarachach as vile seo. Ha sin frickerst na dúlan ire hoon. Chai barach get a haskig. Ha sin shalting na chai seo gírach bíle saulchal. Chur sin anje die príomh dragan a hu fulham Gaelic. Ha sin príomhachas in horst de gníomhan coirsnach agus iontachach go bhfuil féim targetin ard amasach. I will.
Douglas Ross.
The Deputy First Minister for giving way, and she's speaking about the investment that comes with this bill. Does she accept, or how does she reflect on previous investment with the Gaelic language? And I think about police cars and uniforms being labelled with both the language of Scotland and Gaelic. Could that investment have been put into Gaelic services that we are seeing now years ago, rather than symbolic on police cars and uniforms, and would that have been a better spend of that money?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, hantiana gorm gyfel bawl feinach ma carichin is rydym mar sy'n cari ysde budget far fel barach eriget gleir son y Gaelic, barach na 30 million not, 2 million not y farach na fawns y budget son y Gaelic. Agus bies egysyn na chael na rydyn sy'n saulchol, gyfel cwtramach, gyfel sy'n y feichging yn canon ac yn hun, gyfel sy'n y Kishin mar ha hol dunje ile agus gewel kutramach gewel kormen dunje gewel Gaelic wie furach agus klachige Gaelic fat na hunje Alistair.
Alistair Allen.
Taple wil les die vinnister guntach nach hele gidach gen of kiel gewel dunje ga aungwa magra nach hele nugi na Gaelic ach gidach gevelat nugi a Gaelic eichen.
Well, I'm expecting gyfel tor dwnia yn ei canon mar Gaelic agus alabish ach ag yn llawn hawl ha dwnia ha a votug son y party yn le gyfel Gaelic agus gyfel alabish agus ha cwtramach gyfel sy'n y rwch gych dwnia am gach farti gyfel yn canon agus mar a fel dwnia am yn alabe a torch taich gan canon ac yn hun. Haniel dwych sy'n bu ile dol fi teicl rys yn canon ac yn hun. Ha mi sbwyndig na chael môr an unia ac am Iracl, so a cwtramach gyfel sy'n mi ydrych dol chwmel orym. Bi'n bil sio leis na harichin agos na sgrifenyn cwtramach y lennis. Torsgein frame oprach a machine gus urtus y farach a chosin de Gaelic agos alabish. Bi cuach gan y vile gwpad cola di chéle agus fémi ar focus yn ish y fi bwlchach y vile agus y fi giano yn as moa as na cuach gan ure sio mor an tain.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. Can I just double check that the Deputy First Minister moved the motion?
I didn't, but I move it now.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. I now call on Miles Briggs to open on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I start by thanking the many individuals and organisations who've engaged with me on the bill, and also to the Deputy First Minister and our officials for that positive engagement as well. I joined the Education Committee last October, and so very much have come late to the party in relation to this bill. However, I hope that the amendments achieved to simplify Gaelic medium education requests and some of the other measures in the bill will provide a strong framework which will ultimately help develop future pathways to learn to speak Gaelic, and especially for the young speakers of tomorrow. After 25 years of the Scottish Parliament being in existence, I do not think that we can look back and see the progress that many of us would have liked to see made, not only to protect but also to develop the language. There have been some positive developments, but we need to be honest that the language continues to be extremely vulnerable and must be nurtured if it is to survive and thrive. 20 years after the Gaelic Language Scotland Act We must take stock on how the policy frameworks, including the Gaelic language plans, the Gaelic medium education, and initiatives to raise the profile of Gaelic in various sectors have not been achieved, and the outcomes which we had all hoped they would in previous parliaments have not been reached. And I very much associate myself with the remarks of Michael Mara in relation to targets and the ability for us to judge where progress is needed and also where resources need to be focused. For example, if we look at Wales and the example they have set, and I do acknowledge when I have raised this, they have been more proactive in this space since the 1930s in protecting the Welsh language, but significant progress has been made there to protect and develop the language, including in terms of the target which the Welsh Assembly Parliament are now setting, and that is a target of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. As well as other targets in relation to the use of their language. The Welsh Bill also establishes a statutory body, the National Welsh Language Learning Institute, and I very much welcome the amendments in Willie Rennie's name in relation to Salma Rostig. Having visited many years ago with Liz Smith, I was hugely impressed with the work the institution were undertaking. There can be probably no better view outside a lecture theatre as well, perhaps only here in the capital, but I hope the opportunity which is now in the bill for the institution to move forward as a national centre for Gaelic language education and culture can be secured as soon as possible. And I hope that we will see the positive progress around that, which the Deputy First Minister has clearly outlined that she wants to see progress made as soon as is possible. And I'm pleased to have managed to work cross-party to take forward amendments in relation to Gaelic medium education and how we can simplify the process for parents and carers to request GME, and for local authorities to then be able to accommodate and take these requests forward is important. I fully acknowledge the financial pressures facing our councils, but it is important if we are going to save the Gaelic language and improve uptake of speakers, that this is taken forward. And I very much welcome the positive work which I've been able to take forward with government, but also campaigners. And I'd like to also thank Wilson MacLeod and Dr Gillian Munro, who are here today, for their help and support to take forward these amendments, and the work which they have done over many years to support and promote Gaelic medium education. Future pathways to speak and learn Gaelic are now part of this bill, and I hope they will succeed where we haven't seen that pick up. Deputy Presiding Officer, the development of areas of linguistic significance, I hope, has the potential to not only stabilise the language, but also to help create a positive, localised environment to give people the confidence to use their language and further develop structures around speakers. On a visit to South Uist with the Social Justice Committee to Knock Solier, I saw firsthand how the community hub can help promote and celebrate the community's Gaelic culture, heritage, but also provide that multi-generational learning space to save and take forward the language. And I think that provides a great vision of how public and private sectors can come together to take forward some of the policy work as well. In the coming years, it is clear that we will continue to face financial pressures, but I hope that we have a cross-party understanding that resources should rightly be focused on how to make the most progress to stabilise and grow the language in areas where it is more widely spoken. Of 20% we have put within the bill. And these areas of linguistic significance will therefore be important to see where the language is being developed. To conclude, Deputy Presiding Officer, Scottish Conservatives have a long and proud record of supporting the Gaelic language, from the positive reforms of the major government back in the late 1990s to present times. And I would also put on record the contribution made by a number of my colleagues, both past and present, Liz Smith and Donald Cameron, Ted Brocklebank and Sir Jamie McGrigor, who have had long time and long distinguished contribution to supporting the Gaelic language in Parliament. This bill is, though, not going to turn around the decline in the language alone, but I hope the overall policy aims to increase the use and the opportunities to learn Gaelic will ensure a vibrant part of Scotland's cultural landscape for future generations to come. And we can all look back at this point as an opportunity to take forward the language. And we will be supporting the motion at decision time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Briggs. I now call on Michael Mara to open on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's now 20 years since the first Gaelic Language Act was passed in 2005. And the vital question for all of us today is, where will the Gaelic language be in 20 years' time? Research by academics at the University of the Highlands and Islands, published in 2020 as The Gaelic Crisis in the Vernacular Community, revealed some very stark findings. The social use of Gaelic within communities is, I quote, at the point of collapse. The decline in Gaelic speakers is steepest amongst young people, the majority of whom are not using Gaelic socially or in the home. Without changes to policy and intervention at community level, they warn that the present Gaelic vernacular community will not survive beyond the next decade. And that is 5 years ago. Time is clearly running out. I have genuinely appreciated the collegiate nature of the Deputy First Minister's approach since she took over this bill. Various members have said to me that with her far greater and longer knowledge than I have of this policy area, there is a desire to maintain a consensus approach to Gaelic that has underpinned previous laws. And I think that is represented in some of this approach. We should certainly not risk prevalent culture wars and use Gaelic culture and Gaelic language as part of that and the politicisation of it. But I do have a genuine concern, a very genuine concern across our party, that a cosy consensus is simply not working, that we are continuing to go in the wrong direction. So we were disappointed that in the face of this existential crisis for Scotland's ancient language, the SNP government chose to bring a very narrowly drawn education-focused bill, and I've expressed that to the Deputy First Minister. Of course, education is important for the survival of Gaelic. Yes, it is. But it is not the principal means by which the language will be saved, or where the changes are required. The underlying reasons for the decline in Gaelic speakers, particularly among younger generations, are not in the excellent teaching found in Stornoway, nor in Gaelic medium education schools in Glasgow or Edinburgh. The principal issues that endanger Gaelic are principally economic and social. Young people grow up in traditional Gaelic-speaking areas, but then find there are not enough homes, not enough well-paid jobs, or reliable ferries or roads for them to build lives for themselves in their communities. Instead, they leave for opportunities in urban areas, whether in Scotland or further afield, far from the Gaelic heartlines and increasingly unlikely to return. These are the issues that we should be tackling as a Parliament and I hope as a government. But all of those issues are out scope of the bill. Scottish Labour's 2023 policy paper, Gaelic, an Economic Plan for a Living Language, argued that economic issues, including housing, jobs and other critical infrastructure, must be addressed in order to arrest the decline of Gaelic. When the report of the Short Life Working Group on Economic and Social Opportunities for Gaelic, a group commissioned by the Deputy First Minister herself in March 2022, made very similar arguments, not perhaps going as far as we did, but certainly very similar in tone. But the government does not appear to have listened to those arguments. And I would maybe ask the Deputy First Minister to reflect on some of that in her closing remarks. I fear that the SNP government have turned their face against the very real prospect that in 20 years' time there could be no Gaelic language left to save, that was put in the too hard to deal with pile. I welcome the amendments the Government has worked with members across the Chamber to bring forward to this legislation and the modest incremental changes that they bring to the bill. I was struck that this week that the focus of the Government's press activity around this bill has been Gaelic medium education, and we are strong supporters of Gaelic medium education themselves, and there have been minor tweaks supported by all parties to ensure that that is provided. But it is inevitably peripheral to whether Gaelic survives as a living language. And that is part of the evidence that comes out, perhaps part of what the Deputy First Minister referred to as the challenge emerging from the census figures. That whereas there's a larger number of people speaking a basic level of Gaelic, those continuing to use that beyond childhood is decreasing rather than increasing. So we have to be concerned for the actual ability to use it as a living language rather than something that is peripheral to people's lives as an add-on to Scots culture, as to be integral to the way that people live their lives. So Scottish Labour will support the bill tonight, but we do so whilst sounding the alarm that, in the Deputy First Minister's words, merely building on what has come before will be insufficient to meet the sure trust of our ancestors, with a new certainty that if we do not change course, and Gaelic is lost in this generation, part of Scotland will be gone forever.
Thank you, Mr Mara. I now call on Ross Greer to open on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think we all went into this bill process agreeing not just about the crisis for Gaelic as a living language, but the importance of it to Scotland's culture. There wasn't that same consensus on the status, the importance, or even the definition of Scots at the start of the process. And we have grown support for legislative provisions for Scots through this, but as we have just seen with some of the last amendment votes, there is clearly more work to do to build support, to build consensus across this Parliament in support of the Scots language. I am glad, though, that my amendments to include provisions for more education resources and extending the Scots language strategy to more public bodies were at least passed by majority. But I don't want to lose importance of what I think is the most important element of the bill for the Scots language, and it's simply its recognition in law for the first time. Symbolic recognition is important after centuries of denigration. Scots is a living language and thriving in all sorts of ways that Gaelic isn't, despite sustained efforts to force it out. And on Gaelic, we've waited 20 years for a new bill. I think it's fair to say that when this bill was first published, it was underwhelming. And it wouldn't really have that transformational impact that we're all looking for. The amendments that have been brought forward and agreed between stages 2 and 3 have made significant improvements to it. And I would commend the excellent Bill team who worked with members of all parties on amendments. They are brilliant advocates for both languages within the Scottish Government, and the Cabinet Secretary should be very proud of their work. We all understand the context for Gaelic. It's been mentioned already. The number of learners is growing largely as a result of the Duolingo effect and the establishment of more GME schools in our cities. But in traditional communities, where it's a living language, it's in steep decline. And Mishnik, the Gaelic activist organisation, said, "We desperately need qualitative targets both overall and in GME output. We're seeing an improvement in overall numbers of people self-identifying as having some Gaelic ability, thanks to Duolingo, GME and other learning initiatives. However, we are still seeing a precipitous decline in people who can and do use the language in their daily lives." Presiding Officer, I think we've started to address that with the reporting requirements, for example, and some of the specifics that will come later through guidance and strategy. But the contrast between the growth of those with Gaelic language skills in our cities and the decline in traditional communities is a stark one. There's huge demand for GME schools in Glasgow and in Edinburgh. There's some extracurricular activities that are being established around that in Gaelic. Some progress, but it is clearly not yet a community language. You can't use Gaelic when you go shopping in Glasgow or in Edinburgh. But if we compare that to the evidence that one of our witnesses gave us, who'd just been in Stornoway a couple of days before coming to Parliament for the Stage 1 process in this bill, she said that one of the best examples she could think of Gaelic as a living language was seeing a group of teenage boys misbehaving in Gaelic in Stornoway. That was the example she used for what a living language really looks like. And new tangible provisions in this bill to advance that are essential. But again, I don't think we should dismiss the value that, of the signal that Parliament sends by passing this bill in and of itself. Symbolism matters. The legitimacy of Gaelic and Scots in this country is still being challenged, and the Government and Parliament are making a clear statement that in law we believe these languages, our languages, have value. And the bill goes some way to addressing those challenges, but on its own, it's clearly not enough. No one would suggest it is enough. It is a hugely important moment this afternoon, though. As I said, for the first time in 20 years for Gaelic, and the first time ever for Scots to be recognised in law by this Parliament. We have a stronger bill in front of us as a result of the work of Parliament and tireless advocates like Wilson MacLeod, Gillian Munro and Matthew Fitt from Scots House. I think we can all be proud of the bill that we're going to vote for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Greer. And I now call on Willie Rennie to open on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Up to 4 minutes, please.
It's on occasions like this where I feel inadequate that I don't speak the language of Gaelic. But Liberal Democrat members in the past have been fluent. Well, John Farquhar Munro was a keen advocate of the language, and on one occasion when he was delivering his contribution to the debate, there was silence through the translation. And George Lyon, also my former colleague, made a point of order asking whether something was technically incorrect. But it wasn't. The translator just couldn't understand a word that John Farquhar was saying. Such is perhaps the diversity of the language. But I'm really grateful to the Deputy First Minister for piloting this bill through, because I think it has given, speaking to the points that Michael Mara's made, I think it has given a new focus and energy to the whole revitalisation of the Gaelic language, because we were pretty underwhelmed by the bill when we started. It's pretty minimalist. It has improved, Ross Greer's right. But the reality is that if we're just relying on this bill to revitalise the language, we're going to fail. And I was grateful that the Deputy First Minister recognised that. And if I could say, I think if she had started off this process, this would not be her bill. She would be doing something much more substantial, together with a wider plan that she has instigated in other areas. Because we know that we are in a crisis, that there is a real determination from many, but that determination may not be enough. We saw from the witnesses that gave evidence to the committee that there was pretty strong views and strong tensions, and in some occasions it was just as well the witnesses were sitting with somebody in between them on occasions, because they felt so strongly about the language and its importance. But like Ross Greer, I was incredibly grateful for the support of the Bill team. They are outstanding, and they're not just outstanding, but they care deeply about the language, and I think that gives me some confidence that we'll be able to move forward and make some progress on this. Because the issue here is that the language used to be suppressed by the state. Now it is supported by the state. It is elevated up by the state. But just at that very time, when the state is behind the language, people are neglecting it in their communities. They're moving away from it in their communities. And that's the thing that should alarm us. Although we are getting the language expanded and spread across Scotland in schools, when it comes to the pub or in the cafes or at home, people aren't taking the language home. They aren't using it on a daily basis in the way that we would like it to be used. It shouldn't be peripheral to their lives. It should be central to their lives. So we need that critical mass to make that happen. And that's where the extra support in communities will be required, to give it the critical mass and credibility to make it enhanced in our communities, so that it doesn't retreat further. And there is a bizarre knock-on effect from spreading Gaelic medium education into their cities, because there is now a shortage in many schools in traditional areas of Gaelic medium education teachers. And it's bizarre, it's extraordinary in some ways that the very communities that we're trying to help are the ones that are damaged by the expansion across the country, it could be said. So we need to make sure that we do give the right support in our traditional communities. I'm pleased that the Samba Rostig amendment was through, and I hope to see it given enhanced and elevated status so that it does become that national centre. I'm pleased that we are actually moving towards a simplified process for designating Gaelic medium education schools. I'm particularly interested in the Gaeltag, the areas of linguistic significance and what the potential is with that. On the surface, it actually is pretty vacuous. It might not mean an awful lot unless local authorities and communities get really behind it. And that's where my hope is, that there is a central gathering point for energy to make changes, to make sure that the retreat is reversed and enhanced. But finally, I am also pleased about the enhancement for Scots for the first time. I think it's an important community, it's an important part of our society, and we should be supporting it. So on that point, I'll conclude, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Rennie. We now move to the open debate. We have one member seeking to speak, Alistair Allen. Up around 4 minutes, please.
Of gereeli hami elie tolistje een pies reachgus shoechten either bialov en Jew caught beggars fichet blione on the high gawalische hietach gaelic ach hook individu gedane gaelic an the doyen gema kutramach. Han bille shaw en jastiger en bille oer shaw en jastiger agus a gaharchug en reachgus hakin meraha gus gen of kinchug gevilchen a Jeon agus a brostnachug na gaelic agus allapish an santoya biar agus as efoch kiche agus is surin goin er schon na ginneluchen de hien. Presiding Officer, the meeste what I had to say today is in Gaelic, as you would expect for the member for the Western Isles, but if we kens I grew up in another part of Scotland altogether, where Scots is to the fore yet. Scots is at the heart of many lowland communities, and for all the sneers, or some folk it kens no better, it is at the heart of Scotland's literature forby. So I'm glad to see it at the Arc afore us, minds both of Scotland's native leads. I hope we can be by with all the antrim nories about Scots. It was threepit for sundry arts and parts of this charmer the last time we spoke here on the subject, and recognise the day that all leads his dialect. Gaelic and Scots both at bilingual road signs isn't the end of civilisation, and at Scots and Gaelic isn't like the nose and chin of Willie Wassell's wife, by which I ettle to say they didn't threaten either or anybody else. Could you? Hame son uierpen luch uie volg, en da goed je son na hoprug kroeie rinjig le jiffer goonje agus vuyenan hadish id an unie galv agus son een bille shaw heen lessig en a gai ulchig. Hij een toer was oprug jenev son een bille jenev na bewaatide. Hame gema tangel den les frie vinnister son wie gopet kale de omse agus kale de kaag son na biachken akinje a horste stiach in de wille voor de Russian kommisig a jeno. Ha is gewil biachken Jeffrey Jan huv en daaie dorst, gus de galike jen, maar 4 gaan kaiers nog. Agus wa immer tuk dunje jup die in München 4 gaan aan zich kaiers nog. Agus hasjen ik aan karan kukeloch maar wat dunje bdien mi een kutjoch. Gyda fa figuren de loch gionsig na Gaelic gedi gesoljer in zijn data van groente slooi me jeddig gemeenst nog Gaelic haast de creonog in de geeltoch agus geharid jam dulichera ans de hele nier. She mogul gempi mogen opreguren maar na skieren kan en sorgje een kuren keel ans een reachges sja a chudis malje a creonog shen gus an kan en gleeg ans na kaiers nog genakken. Het was steeds later de groep lessige wies na saske is na duinje. Kon ik schon server is of ik really aan een film termee in de Gaelic had ik in een jeget lione galf. Ha eertes moor is een toy film show. Agus a ganjen krappen starre a haun en kosh trainer agus vaste lucht tjegusk. Hieschen gewil arven en scholar in de heeg trofulum Gaelic a schier eri. En met een immerst vuurneduge betullen mollig a hoort geharrig is uierpen korden in Nederland schier gus aardskol Gaelic stierug. Of really, ham dag is gembi een bille show en jarstig uierpen en sjorste show het vuurne halpe agus gembi a parlement jak in je heen a ganjig agus aan een 2 uur. En je geeft alpen de jaar jij als zo'n een gilep immer gaan nog hakken je maar doe.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. We will now move to closing speeches. I call on Ross Greer to close on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I have to say it was a privilege to follow Dr. Allen, someone who's done so much to contribute towards both Gaelic and Scots. As has been said already, this bill alone won't save Gaelic or won't restore Scots to the status that it deserves. There are so many other factors at play, and I want to start off by touching on an issue that a few other members have mentioned, and that's the housing crisis that is driving the crisis in Gaelic as a living language. And that is a crisis largely driven by the increase of holiday homes and short-term lets. One councillor in Skye reckons that 60% of properties there are empty over the winter because they are second homes or short-term lets. House prices on Skye are £60,000 higher than the national average. And this is driving young people out of their communities, driving young Gaelic speakers, exactly the kind of people that we need to stay in these communities to continue Gaelic as a living language. They're being driven out because it's simply impossible for them to find somewhere to live in their own community as an adult. The licensing of short-term lets has definitely helped, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. Far more targeted housing policy is needed, specifically to support the recovery, the survival of Gaelic as a living language, I would suggest targeted increases in the additional dwelling supplement for areas of linguistic significance as one of the most obvious ways in which we can lever tax policies to support Gaelic speakers to actually stay, to live in, to raise families in the communities that they've grown up in. And the third stage of the housing bill coming after summer recess is an opportunity for all parties to bring forward proposals on this issue, given that I think speakers from all parties across the stages of this bill have raised housing as one of the key issues for us to consider. Sticking with Skye, though, I'm really proud of the provisions in the bill for Salma Rostig and my work with Gillian Munro, Willie Rennie, the Cabinet Secretary and the Bill team. I think we have set a very clear process and direction of travel. Salma Rostig is a world-class institution, and a change in its status and enhanced abilities is, I think, crucial to the delivery of the wider agenda that we all share for Gaelic recovery, not least to address the shortage of GME teachers. Teaching resource provisions that we've just agreed will also make GME teaching a more attractive prospect. It reduces, I hope eliminates, that significant additional workload burden that does put Gaelic speakers off from becoming Gaelic medium teachers. I've got to say, surprised by Labour's opposition to those provisions being extended to Scots as well. I'd be happy to discuss that with them, but I am glad that those passed, because I think that we do need to end the shame that has been felt by millions of Scots for speaking our own language in our own country. Most, if not all of us, have been reprimanded at some point in our life and told to speak properly when we're simply using one of this country's native languages. Now, success is going to look different in different places. In our cities, it's going to be about moving beyond GME school provision into more community spaces, whereas in the likes of Skye or in Lewis, it's about protecting Gaelic as a community, a living language. And it's that latter point that is most critical here. I do want to recognise the different perceptions and appetites in different communities. I think we should recognise the hostility to these efforts. There's not always inherent hostility to Gaelic. In some cases, in our cities, I think we do need to recognise the class dynamics around GME education. I welcome the location of the new GME school in the Calton in Glasgow. I think we should recognise that parents whose kids are not being met in English medium schools can understandably be frustrated seeing additional resources for GME schools whose children are overwhelmingly drawn from more privileged socio-economic backgrounds. But the solution is to resource all schools and to meet all kids' needs, not to play different needs off against each other. And it does grate a bit when some argue that the range of social ills that we face mean that we shouldn't be prioritising the recovery of our native languages. After centuries of decline and deliberate marginalisation and oppression, when should that start? So I hope that all parties remember the comments that they've made today when it comes to budget time and the allocation of these resources. But in closing, Presiding Officer, this is a good day for Gaelic, for Scots and for Scotland. It is just one part of the puzzle, but Parliament is sending a message today that these are our languages. If Scotland's Parliament won't support and protect them, no one else will. And I'm maybe being optimistic here, but I hope today is seen as a turning point, and in particular that it's the start of Gaelic's recovery as a living, celebrated language.
Thank you, Mr Greer. I now call on Pam Duncan-Glancy to close on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 4 minutes, please. Thank
you, Presiding Officer, and can I start by apologising to Presiding Officer, to the Deputy First Minister and others in the Chamber for my late arrival to the speech and debate this afternoon. I'm pleased to close today's debate on behalf of Scottish Labour and to confirm our support for the Scottish Languages Scotland Bill at Stage 3. And I'd like to start by thanking the legislation team, who I rather suspect have scored me off the Christmas card list this week after the significant amendments lodged. But they work tirelessly and I appreciate all the work that they do. I'd also like to thank the Deputy First Minister and her team for engaging with us on these benches on the bill. And finally, to thank my own team and members across these benches for their support to getting us where we are today. Presiding Officer, it was a Labour-led government that introduced the Gaelic Language Act in 2005. We, like others, are committed to its survival and revival and to supporting the cultural, educational and community life that surrounds it, which others today, including the Deputy First Minister, Dr Allen and others, have spoken passionately of. And it is supporting and enhancing that community life that's driven our approach to the bill. Because, Presiding Officer, without a living community, with a working economy, the Gaelic community and our ancient culture will cease to exist. As my colleague Michael Mara set out, we regret that the scope of this bill didn't extend to such matters including housing, jobs, connectivity directly. Academics and, of course, the report of the Short Life Working Group on Economic and Social Opportunities for Gaelic, led by Kate Forbes, agrees these matters are crucial. And I hope that today's bill will be a catalyst to ensure those get the attention they need. Presiding Officer, nonetheless, we worked hard to have a meaningful role in strengthening this bill, because we know that without significant action, Gaelic will cease to be a living language. Our amendments helped communities have a key voice in action on Gaelic, and they will now be involved in decisions about their community and their language. I'm disappointed the Government didn't support the provision of a dedicated development officer, so I think this could have ensured a local resource working with communities. But I hope that in supporting the board to discharge its duties that the Deputy First Minister mentioned, they can ensure that areas and communities that are designated in this Act do get the help that they need to grow and flourish their community and their language. Presiding Officer, there will now be targets in law, thanks to my colleague Michael Mara, with the Government and other support, essential to ensure that we meet the level of action needed for the language to survive. And for the first time, of course, the SQA will be under a duty to ensure that a meaningful number of qualifications are available through the medium of Gaelic and that resources are provided to support this. Other members, Ross Greer, Miles Briggs and Willie Rennie, have also spoken passionately and acted to give meaning to the bill for education, including in parental rights, in provision for schools, support and support for Solmarostig. Whilst we still believe the bill could have and should have gone further, many of these changes mean that the bill now begins to meet the challenge that so many campaigners and academics have pointed to, that Gaelic cannot be revived solely in the classroom. It must live in communities, and with the right structures and support, it can. I want to thank colleagues across the Chamber who worked together to improve the bill. Those changes reflect what we heard in committee and from others, that for the Gaelic language to thrive, it must be visible, viable and valued, not only but including in schools, but in homes, workplaces and in public life. Presiding Officer, this bill wasn't perfect, and the work does not end here. But with the amendments that this Parliament has now made, we believe it is a much stronger foundation. The challenge is now implementation for the Government to provide the long-term resource and leadership that are needed, and I'm sure that together we will rise to that challenge so that Gaelic communities have waited too long for action, and it's time we match those words with delivery, and I hope that today's bill will make that happen. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Duncan Clancy. I now call Ros McCall to close on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I have a privilege in being able to close this afternoon's debate on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives at the Scottish Language Bill. And just as I said at the Stage 1 debate, as Scottish Conservatives whose ethos is based in tradition, we believe that our customs and heritage play an important part on who we are. We're proud of our shared culture and agree that we need to uphold and encourage our traditional languages. And if I could play on language for just a second, what can be more basic to a Scottish Conservative than to conserve Scots? Language in all its forms is the key to communication, and so little communication is actually effective. The innate understanding of the spoken and written word is not only the way to break down barriers, but it's essential in fostering bonds and ensuring traditions are there for future generations to come. Now, the Deputy First Minister will be pleased to hear that I'm not going to repeat the history lesson of the Scots origins in this debate. The Scottish Conservatives are in support of making Gaelic more accessible, and I have to say that I think it's important that we highlight that that is not party-centric. I think there's an awful lot of support across the Chamber for making sure that it is more accessible. And that's what this bill sets out to achieve. But I think we find ourselves again being worried about the ability of the bill to be actually able to achieve the aims it sets out to do. We cannot legislate and forget. It's no surprise to this Chamber that I'm interested in education, care and well-being of the children of Scotland. And many times in education debates, we are reminded that it's the need of our councils to have the autonomy to progress government legislation, and guidance thus implying that if this bill passed today, which I'm sure it will be entirely down to the process of local authorities to enact. It's therefore very worrying to read the briefing that COSLA sent out for today's debate. As Willie Rennie also stated earlier, where are the Gaelic teachers? It's all well and good moving forward on legislation, but it's the outcomes that matter. And as a former councillor, I know firsthand the issues in taking forward educational changes. The 1140 hours expansion of childcare was a classic example. And COSLA is quite right to highlight concerns that there when they state our submission to the earlier consultation referenced a report which noted that too few Gaelic medium education teachers were being trained. The pipeline of Gaelic teachers is often out with a local authority control, and without concerted effort and action from the Scottish Government and partners to increase the number of Gaelic teachers, any expansion would not be deliverable, and this is something that must be addressed. We know from other projects, as I already stated, 1140 hours childcare provision, that funding falters at the first hurdle. COSLA also highlighted this issue when it raised their concerns in relation to the estimated costs for local government, noting that there wasn't sufficient information provided in order to assess the accuracy of estimated costs, but these seemed low and that some implications for local authorities appeared to be missing. They go on to highlight that the supplementary financial memorandum focuses only on the costs associated with Stage 2 amendments, but there is still concern that remains of the costs of implementing the bill haven't been sufficiently captured, and the Government must do more to ensure that the funding is there. And the final point from COSLA is that at Stage 2 there were fully agreed amendments by the Committee for Gaelic Education. The Scottish Government introduced amendments to create a process for local authorities to consider requests to establish all Gaelic schools. Local government is concerned about the time, resources and expenses of carrying out these new duties. There are a number of all Gaelic schools in the absence of this legislation. So the local government's view is that Section 22A takes away the ability of the Education Authority to determine the best location for Gaelic language provision and requires them to spend officer time and effort which may be determined that provision is unviable. So, Presiding Officer, the Scottish Conservatives recognise this bill has good intentions and it is a springboard to speed up process. But there are concerns whether this will stabilise or deliver a sustainable future for Gaelic and Scots language, and it's far from clear. Only time will tell if it goes the way of other initiatives, free school meals, bikes, laptops, other possibilities for every child. Will we see that actual development of our traditional speech? Well, I'll wait with bated breath. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McCall. I call on the Deputy First Minister to wind up.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Is get a year it ri cwr asgein hi mochiawlwch chnoch yn lun is get a ha ar canon liont les tri sy'n cheer shaw be bio. Although they tried to destroy us, my children will see the landscape of generations. Although the language has been wounded in its struggle, in this land she will live on. Presiding Officer, as I close this debate, I want to stress at the outset that my primary concern throughout this process is to introduce this bill on a cross-party basis. There have been keen advocates for the language in every party represented here today. The Conservatives can be proud that they were the party that first introduced the very concept of Gaelic medium education. Labour, with, I think, some support from the Lib Dems, can be proud that they introduced the 2005 Act for Gaelic. There has been work that my own party has led on, and I've been so grateful for the support from the Scottish Greens. I said in answer to a previous intervention that there are voters across Scotland who use Gaelic as their everyday language, who live, breathe and work in the language. And I know from speaking to them that it matters intensely to them that they have representatives that reflect their values and concerns in the party space, but who also realise how precious their language is. And so I am so grateful to members who have risen to that challenge of ensuring that this truly has been a national endeavour with representation, participation and contributions from every party. And I'm particularly grateful to Miles Briggs, who assumed responsibility for the bill after it had been introduced. This bill is a milestone. It's a marker of the progress that we are making. I too add my enormous thanks to the Bill team and to the government team who are sitting up the back that are hopefully looking forward to an early night tonight after working extremely hard for about 18 months. When it comes to debates about our languages, Presiding Officer, it's very difficult not to look back and to look forward. I'm struck that when it comes to language study and historical analysis, that when a frontier has receded of a Gaelic-speaking community, or indeed a Scots-speaking community, there's no evidence yet that it has recovered. My own forebears hail from the Applecross Peninsula, and you will hear some Gaelic today, but you certainly don't hear its vibrancy as I did when I was a child. And when speakers pass on, when they pass away and take with them that rich cultural heritage of a language, we lose something as a nation unless it is passed on to the next generation. And then I also look to the future. And I think Ross Greer said, these are our languages. They are Scotland's languages. They are nobody else's languages. And if we can't protect them and nurture them, then nobody else will. So it is up to us. The consultation responses and the evidence received throughout the course of this bill has been enormously helpful. I smiled when I think Michael Maher was at Willie Rennie talked about the fact that occasionally witnesses, you were glad that witnesses were separated. But that speaks to, I think, the strength of feeling about the language and also the value of diversity and debate and sometimes dispute about the best way forward, because it is in caring about these languages that we debate them. And it's in the debate that we have that democratic representation. And as I said to Pam Duncan-Glancy when she introduced her first amendments, I applaud the debate that we have around the language, and I'm thankful for members' participation in it. Now, Willie Rennie and Michael Maher both talked about the fact that legislation has limits, and I would be the first to recognise that you can't legislate into existence language. If language is truly a living, breathing medium of communication, it has to be about more than what governments pass, what parliaments pass in the form of legislation. Now, I have been somewhat preoccupied by this bill, but having met on Friday with the members of the Short Life Working Group on social and economic opportunities for Gaelic, I stressed to them that our focus will be on implementing the recommendations that they made through their brilliant report. The areas that they raised are the very areas that Parliament has been inviting me to go further on. Questions about population retention and infrastructure, questions about housing, questions about transport, digital connectivity, education, jobs, key sectors, all the things that bring our communities to life, irrespective of where they are represented. And these too are critically important for strengthening Gaelic, because ultimately language is about the people. We talk about Gaelic and Scots as if they are tangible assets independent of people. But ultimately, it is about the speakers and how they prosper and how they are successful and how their well-being is taken into account. And I would very much like to continue the cross-party consensus that we have achieved through this bill and work with members to implement the recommendations that the cross-party group identified as being critically important. I wanted to touch briefly on the points that Ros McCall made about local government, because she's absolutely right. And this came through the discussions, particularly around areas of linguistic significance. Should government centrally direct and mandate, or should it be an iterative process with our local authorities? And I think our local authorities are key, both in taking responsibility and also reflecting local diverse needs. I've spoken to the 3 primary local authorities for Gaelic, Argyll and Bute, Highland Council, the Western Isles, there's a variety of different political representation within those local authorities. I want to work with them at pace to understand not just what is going to be expected of them, but also how we support them to take that forward. And, Presiding Officer, I have forgotten how much time you gave me, so if I could just take a few more seconds to say that one of the biggest changes in the bill today is around education. And whilst we are focusing on community, we know that for young people in particular, learning the language or being able to study in their native tongue through school is critically important. And the bill strengthens Gaelic medium education considerably. And of course, the provision of Gaelic medium education by an education authority can fulfil the foundational duty in our education law to provide adequate and efficient education. And authorities may consider that providing only Gaelic medium education is appropriate in certain areas. Indeed, it's almost happening right now. But that will be the case in an area of linguistic significance where there is a high proportion of Gaelic speakers, and an authority would require to satisfy itself that in doing so they would comply with their wider legal duties as well. And so, Presiding Officer, as I do come to a conclusion, I started with that quote which was written by Rory and Callum MacDonald of Runrig. And the point it ends with is that she will live on in this land. That is the choice that we have made by passing the bill tonight, and that is the choice that I hope all future generations make, because the value, the heritage, the culture, the wealth in our language is not something we should squander. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on Scottish Languages Bill at Stage 3. It's now time to move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of Parliamentary Bureau Motion 18002 on committee meeting time, and I ask Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on this motion will be put at decision time, and I'm minded to accept a motion without notice under Rule 11.2.4 of Standing Orders that decision time be brought forward to now, and I invite the Minister to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. And the question is that decision time be brought forward to now. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed, and there are two questions to be put as a result of today's business. The first question is that motion 17966 in the name of Kate Forbes on Scottish Languages Bill at Stage 3 be agreed. And as this is a motion to pass the bill, the question must be decided by division, and there will be a brief suspension to allow members to access digital voting.